Hello everyone, Oleg here. I will be your host for today, and you're watching Testcontainers Live. This is the episode number 1, which is the second episode in this season. And I'm very happy to introduce and welcome our today's guests, Kevin Wittek, who's an engineer at Atomic Jar, who is one of the core maintainers of the Testcontainers Java library, and is a brilliant engineer. So, Kevin, how are you?
Yeah, hi Oleg, thanks. I'm very fine. I'm coming live to you right now from Istanbul, very near the Bosporus. So if I look out there of the window, I see the Golden Horn and the Bosporus. It's really nice, and I hope my mobile internet connection will make it work. But yeah, I'm happy and looking forward to our stream together today.
Excellent. I hear you loud and clear. We are live on YouTube as well. And I envy you because behind my window, it's minus 15 Celsius. It was minus 25 earlier this week. And this is the temperatures where it gets uncomfortable to breathe outside without protection. So Istanbul sounds absolutely lovely.
So surprisingly warm, actually. So normally Istanbul has a real winter. They also have like mushy snow sometimes. But this year, for whatever reason, we have like 18 degrees Celsius, sunny, so it's okay. Sometimes it's a bit rainy, but I had some nice sunny days. It's okay, yeah.
18 degrees. That is for people who don't speak metric system, 18 degrees is an average California, San Francisco weather, I think, throughout the year.
Very good.
which is very, very good. Right. Excellent. Lovely. So I know that you prepared a few demos for us today, and our topic, the main topic for today, will be the how to use test containers for your integration tests. And I know that you are one of the main members of the team who is always there in the test container Slack, who is always there talking to the community and helping people resolve all kinds of issues that they encounter. So you have the best feeling of what are the sort of the best practices and how they shape in the community and the ecosystem, and also what are the most common mistakes that you see most frequently, issues that people stumble upon especially when they start using test containers. So I thought it would be very, very interesting to invite you and talk specifically about that. What are some of the common mistakes? What are some of the maybe things that people intuitively feel that should work, but maybe that is not a best practice? And I know that you came up with a couple of examples, which we will get a bit later in the stream. So that's what we're going to do. But before we start that, I wanted to just in general to ask you a few things maybe about test containers ecosystem and the test containers community, which I think very, very it's very, very interesting, because normally when I talk to someone about test containers, they might know about Testcontainers Java, which is the one of the main libraries under the Testcontainers organization GitHub, but there are also others. So there are libraries for other languages. How can you maybe elaborate on how it happened to be and what the state of those, and whether they are production ready and in general?
Yeah, so we have implementations or forks, or however you would like to call them, of test containers in other languages. Some of the more notable examples are maybe the Go one, Python, then we have a JavaScript, a Node one, and then also C# and Rust. But they are all different levels of mature and feature complete, I would say. And in some cases, what has happened was that we were seeing somewhere in the open source community such a project emerge, and they sometimes even already used the name test containers for themselves. And then we contacted them and said like, oh, what you're doing like is cool. We think it's a good idea to have such a library as test containers for other languages as well. Would you like to join the test containers group, the organization on GitHub, so that we have this kind of umbrella thing? And Then they often did it. Yes, and that's how we got the different projects. And especially in recent times now, we try to more closely collaborate with the other languages or the maintainers of the other languages to support them in implementing features that the Test Containers Java variant has, and that we as maintainers of the Java implementations think are very good, are very useful, and that they should adopt as well. And we tell them the reasoning for this because we have like an architecture history for some of the decisions we made, and we try to communicate this to them so they don't make maybe the same mistakes, but the other languages are still less mature at this point in time than the Test Containers Java one. So maybe depending beta, sometimes even alpha status, I would say. Yeah.
Right. Which is the very interesting point there is that those are the community projects, and of course they are a little bit different. So hopefully they're more idiomatic in the languages where they actually are useful, right? So me personally, I cannot judge very many languages professionally, right? I can stare at the Java code very nicely, and I can maybe look at some JavaScript code when it's not very complex. But if we get into Go and Rust, this is something that is in my future, I hope.
And it's kind of a challenge. So we have to think, yes, we want to have a language that is idiomatic. So we want to have a library that is idiomatic to the language, but it should be also idiomatic to the test containers concept. So we have to find the compromise there, and maybe find even a bit more concrete guidelines for the other languages on which they can all align to make it more obvious for users switching to another test containers language implementation. So if you already have experience with test containers Java, then you jump into Python. It should at least conceptually follow the same ideas. And yeah, it's getting very loud here right now. Many people walking through the staircase, I think. So I'm not sure if you're hearing this as well. Yeah.
I think it's all fine.
Okay,
yes.
cool.
So I think this is very interesting. You said that we would like the implementations to be idiomatic in the language, right, where it's implemented, but also sort of idiomatic in the test containers abstractions. So one of those is the test containers modules, and that is something that is definitely very well known in the test containers Java ecosystem. There are different modules which are the implementation of the containers that you can start, and they are sort of like a pluggable component to the test containers library, right? So you can, for example, have the Oracle container, and that is the abstraction that specifically creates an Oracle database, a certain version, Express Edition container, and then you use that as naturally in your code as possible, right? And there are modules for all kinds of databases, MongoDB, for Redis, for Kafka, for everyone. Are those modules represented similarly in other languages? How does it work? Can they be reused?
So to my knowledge, the other languages have less concrete ideas about such a concept at this point. So they understand that we have it in Java, but they made like small efforts how to integrate it in the code base, but not that far-reaching as in Java. And also for us, it has been historically a little bit of a challenge and a transition where we did not yet reach the ultimate endpoint, I would say, since, for example, in the beginning, we had those modules as their own repositories. And then it was a bit of a juggling thing to make sure if we update test containers that we also update all the modules accordingly, we release them and so on. And it was on the release process level, it was a bit cumbersome to handle. So now we went to the point where we have more or less a mono repo in test containers Java with all the modules as Gradle subprojects, and that works in a way more nicely, that everything is better integrated, that makes also releasing easier, and you have certainly less duplication in certain parts. But then now you have a very big monorepo at one point with some modules that spin are really heavy containers. So now we have some challenges how to modularize the build again to a certain degree, because if such a big build, then something fails, because sometimes those modules can be flaky because we are very much integrating against technologies that are not in our control. Then the whole build fails and the whole release fails. So that's not ideal. And this is then kind of the next challenge we are now facing with maintaining such a big monorepo. And this is in the case of Java. And we have with Java our mechanism with releasing jars via Maven Central, etc. Other languages have other mechanisms, like Node has NPM and so on. I don't know what are their best practices to structure and to release such things. Yeah.
Right. So what I hear is that modules are not directly transferable between the implementations. So if there is a Kafka module in Testcontainers Java, it might not be present in Testcontainers Python. Good to know.
Yes, to know. Yes, but so if like you are a maintainer of one of the other languages, or someone in the community that thinks such a module it's a good idea, the problems we solve in Java, we generally solve in the instrumentation of the image. In this, so the image has to be configured correctly, and maybe there are some quirks with the networking and so on for the image. But once you understand how we solved it in Java, you can do it the same way in the other languages. So it's still a useful blueprint, so to say, for the other languages. Yeah.
I get it. Yeah. So the knowledge of the solution is transferable, and you just need to implement this. So it becomes just an engineering
just an exercise. Yeah.
Yes. And maybe this is something that if you are interested in Testcontainers libraries in other languages and you are proficient in those, maybe you can contribute. Or they are open source, and I'm sure the maintainers would be ecstatic to receive more contributions and see more usage in the wild. Very, very good. Now, since we're talking about modules, I asked this Sergey last time, not yesterday, of course. I asked this last time, and I think this is a very good question to kind of survey the community a little bit here. And I'm planning to make this a recurring thing with the guests. So which Testcontainers module is your favorite?
So my go-to module I use for all kind of examples is the Postgres one. Yeah. But I think the Kafka one is, from an engineering perspective, my favorite, because and especially Sergey. I think Sergey said the same, maybe, not sure, but we have some clever ideas in the Kafka module to make it really easily usable with Testcontainers and easily usable as a Docker container to a certain degree. So that I find just a really nice, clever engineering solution. But the Postgres one I like because for demos, it's super good to demonstrate things for people, because everyone knows Postgres and it's easy to handle.
Yeah, I'll accept and write down you as a Postgres module fan. Sergey indeed talked about Kafka and the particular engineering challenges and how it's technically very interesting. But yeah, Postgres is great. Okay, I think this was a short.
I think even my first pull request to the main Testcontainers Java project was for the Postgres module.
Oh, interesting. Do you remember how many years ago that was? What's your level of experience with the Testcontainers Java?
I'm not sure how many years. 4, 5, 6, 6-ish. No, I think the library is not that old. Yeah, I would need to dig it up, but at 4, 5 at least it should be.
Yeah. Time flew. Recently, time flew, so it's very hard to judge whether 2017 was like a year ago or 5 years ago.
But I remember specifically that I did this pull request while I was at Gran Canaria on the software craftsmanship conference there, and I was there on the balcony of the hotel doing this pull request. I remember this exactly. Yeah.
So it was more than 3 years ago. Judging from the social cues in that. Excellent. Yeah. So this is it, I think, for the intro. I'm sure that everyone recognizes you as one of the ultimate authorities on the questions of test containers Java, and everyone knows that we should all listen and learn from you when we have a chance. So I think here is where we can start going into the main topic of the today's episode, about the common mistakes that we see in the community adopting test containers, and how to maybe resolve or work around that. And if you have any questions, people watching, I think this is we want to make this as interactive as possible, right? So ask any questions about our, like, whatever you see on the screen, or anything. Yeah, literally ask us anything within the limits, but and we'll try to just accommodate for that. This is not, don't keep your questions until the end of the stream. That is not something we want to do. So we want to be interactive. And I see one question there from Alina immediately is, what is Kevin's microphone?
Yes, so I'm using a Blue Yeti X microphone, and I took this specifically so I have a USB microphone that I can take with me when traveling, for example, to Istanbul, which I sometimes have to do because my wife is from Istanbul, so I have family in Istanbul, extended family, and yes, and I'm okay-ish happy with this, yeah.
We're gonna have the affiliated Amazon links in the description below, where you can see that. No, it's the sound quality is very good. I like that as well. Right. Let's get into the setup and let's try to see some pitfalls. I think you should share the screen at this moment.
Yes, I shall do so.
All right. I see IntelliJ IDEA.
Exactly, yes. So, and to everyone watching or rewatching in the future, we will see some really bad things. I will do some bad things, so please don't repeat them, but we will at one point rework them to go to the more idiomatic ways and to the test containers best practices. So, yes, keep tuned in until the end so you don't learn the wrong things, please. Yes, we have here IntelliJ open. And I have a Spring Boot project that I just generated with start.spring.io, as Josh would say. And I clicked just a couple of dependencies so that we can have some representative integrations we can then test and work with. So we have Spring Boot JDBC starter for some database interactions, then the web starter, and I pulled in MySQL and Postgres drivers because we want to see how we can interact with both of them. Testing, obviously. And then when you install in Spring start.spring.io, when you select the test containers as a dependency you want to use, it will automatically generate you the test containers modules you need. So you get them here very nicely. And if we scroll up or down, scroll down here to dependency management, we see that Spring automatically includes the test containers bill of materials so that we don't have to specify the individual versions of the modules, which would not be a bad thing. So just write the same version everywhere. It's okay, but it's a bit nice. I like this.
Right. So just to elaborate the setup, we are not going to show anything like Spring specific here. This is just the sample, like sort of the polygon where we're gonna do various tests, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, so this is equally applicable to any other framework that you're using, or even if you're not using the framework, you can still see what's the difference between like how you should not maybe use test containers and how you should use test containers before and after.
Yes, exactly. So we will use some Spring specific configs at one point, but the ideas are transferable for all other frameworks, and you can make all other frameworks play nicely with test containers as well. So yesterday I gave a talk at Jakarta conference where we did it with a Jakarta application. And yes, as Oleg said, even with vanilla Java, with no framework, you can do it. And I just see Ingo commenting on that I'm using Windows 11. Yes, Testcontainers works really great on Docker for Windows, in my opinion. And it's one of the reasons why I'm on Windows, to ensure that it keeps on working on Windows. Yeah. So I'm doing it for all of you out there. All right. So far we don't have anything yet. We just have the empty application here, and we can just check what the test would do like this, because I remember also Sergey from the last time that this is his favorite test, because he likes it for showing if the general config is correct. Let's see if we just run this test like this. All right.
It fails.
It fails, yes. So why does it fail? Huh?
This is
Do you
very,
have
very
any-
good. I don't see the text yet, but what I'm just trying to say is that this is very, very good, because the test that you never saw failing is the test that you cannot trust to be correct, because if it was always green, then you don't know whether it actually tests anything, right? So, and we fail this test because Spring tries to create the context, and Spring tries to initialize all the beans in the context. One of them is, of course, the data source, because we define the dependencies that we're going to talk to the databases. So we imported like Postgres, starter, and then to talk to them, we need to configure. So we need URLs to kind of to configure data source, URL, username, and password. I think the properties that we need to do.
Yeah. So if you would have an H2 dependency, it would do it automatically. But since we don't have this, Spring can't do it, and then we have to do it now. Okay. And let's assume we now just do it a complete old school way of configuring in a more or less hard coded way the URL of our Postgres database. So let's add the resources here in an application properties file. So let's assume we have some test database running somewhere. We now make an application properties file for this. Properties, okay. And then it would be Spring data source URL. And that's JDBC, Postgres, and I have to actually look into my notes unless you know it by heart how the URL constructs. PostgreSQL, not Postgres, okay. Then we assume it would run on localhost, and the default port of Postgres is 5432, and it would be some database named I don't know, test. And then username is also test.
There's a type on JDBC.
Test.
There's a type on JDBC.
Exactly.
Very good.
All right. Okay, now if we run it now, it will also not go any further because we have no database running here. So we should see a different error, because now it at least can infer the class, the driver class. So we should see an error that it can't connect or something.
Yeah,
oh no,
passes,
actually it works. It works. Okay.
Nothing tries to connect to the database. So you configure the data source and you never use it. So just specifying the configuration is enough for this test to pass, because it literally just checks whether the context builds and where all the dependencies are resolvable. So this is good.
Exactly. Yes. So good enough. So let's go ahead and add another test that makes it fail. So if we would interact with the database, something should start to fail.
Right. So for the context, let's think about this way. Imagine I am a new user of Testcontainers, and I've heard about how great this library is, which is true. And now I would like to introduce some tests with Testcontainers into my existing project. And I have my application configuration. right? I have my database that I use to connect to that. And now I'm going to start to develop my first test. So how would I do that? What do you see in practice?
We could try to do it in a more TTD way, actually. When I prepared it, I haven't done it like this, but why not? We can try it.
Yeah, sure. What can go wrong? Let's do it first time on stream.
Yes.
Excellent idea.
Something with database. Okay, so today it's not about doing useful things. Yes, it's just about doing something and showing that certain interactions work. So let's go with something. Let's assume we have a class here, and that is some kind of data repository, and we just call it like this. Repository that we would auto wire. So yeah, and it's not a JPA repository, it's just a class we write ourselves, but that represents a repository like in domain-driven design or something. Okay, let's create this class in the main, yes. Okay, and then I can even annotate it with repository stereotype, okay. Should be fine, okay. And then I would have some kind of method on it, yes, okay, like just query database. That also doesn't do anything useful right now, but we just want to have something that interacts with the database to see this integration working. Okay, and this is just void. We don't want anything from there. And now this will of course already work because we just assembled the skeleton here, but now let's fill it in with some actual code, but just like to make sure the dependency injection, everything works as we wanted. Yes, it does. Okay, cool. So now let's add a JDBC template here. And I just annotated with AutoWire to make everyone in the Spring community my enemy.
Don't use field injection. Use constructor injection for the production code purposes.
Yes.
But this is just faster to type. Right.
Yes.
And so JDBC template will be our bean that we actually use to interact with the database.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we can query now the database with a random SQL.
Yes, and like the standard SQL, you can use to like just see that you can interact with Postgres is I think select one. I think.
Yes, I've seen queries like that before, so I think it should work.
Okay, and what we hope now that it fails.
Yes, because there is no actual database behind this test, so we just wired the Java pieces together, and there is a configuration in the application properties, mind you, right? So we had the configuration that points to localhost 5432, but there is no database there, so the test fails with something reasonable saying about that, hopefully. Yeah, connection refused.
Extremely reasonable, I think, yeah.
Excellent. I love when tools have decent error messages. Okay,
Yes,
connection
and,
refused. Now we need the database.
Yes, exactly. And of course, I could now download Postgres and install it locally, but I'm not doing it like this. I'm not an animal. I will use Testcontainers to spin it up on demand as part of my test. And now I'm doing something that you should normally not do like this, but we just do it now like this to get a feeling for this. Yeah, you may remember maybe in university there were sometimes so we had to learn how to write servlets without GSP and everything, like something no one would do. But the professor said, like, you should know how to do it like this, and you will appreciate the niceness of JSPs later. So
right, but without that like lyrical off topic in mind. So we don't have a database running on 5432. So let's use Testcontainers to spin up a Docker to run the database on 5432. That will make our test pass. How do we do that? How some people can think that they should do that.
So, and there might be someone that doesn't even know that we have the Postgres module. So let's start ahead and look how we can do it with generic container, and see how to set it up with a generic container, because you can do it like this, yeah? So our Postgres would be like this, and then we have new generic container, and now I'm opening my notes to the side. Oh, everyone now knows that I have some notes on the side, but of course I can't remember how all those images are called, else I would need to Google. So, and we will not use the normal generic container, we will use the fixed host port generic container, because yes, we assume we want to reach a database on this port. Okay, so many people will want to replicate what they normally would do with running maybe like Docker run -p from 432. Is it still right? Oh, it's stupidly having an you see,
Yeah,
it has
so
a coloring that you don't see.
Exactly.
So, but
That's
someone
what's-
would run something like this: run -p, and then
Yeah.
Postgres. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the intuitive thing to do for many people coming from maybe first Docker experiences.
Our application expects a database there, so you can spin up the database there, right? And to do so, you have a generic container, which is the Testcontainers abstraction for a container that will be run, right? And you make it run and expose itself on the port 5432. So,
Exactly.
as Kevin said, this is not a best practice. Don't do that at home. This is not something that you should be doing, but this is a very natural thing that you might want to do.
Password, and then the user was also test. Okay, so yeah, this should work. And we see here also nicely, oh, what does it say here? Oh, deprecated. Okay, whatever. But we want to do it like this for now. Now we should also start the container. Let's just do it by hand. We're not using any of the JUnit integrations from Testcontainers. Let's just start it by hand in the before block. Before all. Yes, and let's make it static. All right.
So now we're going to start one container for all the tests in this file, at least, right?
Exactly,
and,
yes.
And that should spin up the Postgres 14 and expose it on the local host 5432, which supposedly should make the test ignored. What?
Yeah, it has to be static, the before all and rotated method. It says here even.
Yeah, because it's a class attribute, right? Because it needs to run once for the class. Right, so while it runs, while it pulls the thing, can you talk a little bit maybe about your current setup? Are you using the Docker desktop application? Are you using Testcontainers Cloud?
Yes, so I'm interestingly currently using Docker for Docker Desktop, Docker Windows, yes. So I have Testcontainers Cloud also running, but I have it stopped because I just want to, for now, give you the experience how it looks with a local Docker and that everything works with a local Docker. And later we will also check it out with how it works with Testcontainers Cloud. And I'm just using right now the way you would install Docker Desktop on Windows 10 or Windows 11. Yeah, just download Docker, install Docker Desktop, and it will work like this. Yes, so here we can fix the generics here also, just to get rid of the warning. Yeah. Yes, so if you're using Windows 10, Windows 11, Docker Desktop works super good with Testcontainers. When you're, or maybe one thing to add, I'm using the WSL2 backend and it works even better. So this is very much recommended. But it will work with the named pipe, so you don't have to configure anything like it might have been many years ago when tools were not nicely integrating with Docker for Windows. So everything is good. And then later we will also check how it changes with Testcontainers Cloud. Spoiler, it will not change a lot from your usage experience, just everything will be a bit nicer and smoother. All right, and it worked, yes.
Excellent. So this is we made the test pass. Is this a good solution?
Yeah, so many folk think that is a way to go because they have the port hard coded somewhere, but it's not good for many reasons actually. So if we do it like this, we directly have something I'd like to call an integrated test, and an integrated test, as opposed to an integration test, is a test that will pass or fail more related to some external factors. Like in this case, this test will only be able to run and to start the container if this port is free. So if something else is running on this port, this will fail. If we will start to parallelize, run multiple tests in parallel, this will fail. If we run the tests on another machine, on CI, where we maybe don't know if in parallel other tests are running, other applications have certain ports blocked, it might also start to fail. So that's not a very nice way to do it actually. And in addition, we have not specified any wait strategy here. That means that now as a default, test containers will wait that it can get a connection to this open port, a TCP connection, but that is not a really stable deciding factor. That's the application that the Postgres database inside has started. And we know this from past experiences and from bugs we had in the Postgres module. So this more or less naive approach is really not recommended, and we should now switch this to something better.
Right. So there are at least two issues here. One was the wait strategies, one was the fixed ports exposed, which makes this test prone to fail in maybe different environments that your particular local machine where there is no other applications running currently. So how do we fix this?
Yes, so let's just for now. So we don't touch the wait strategy part right now. We just want to fix the port part to make this better. So we replace this with a generic container. Okay, doesn't have this method anymore. It has the method with exposed ports. Okay. All right. And now what we can do after the container has started, we can query the container for the actual map port. Get map port. Yes, so we could do then like this to get the actual map port. And because if we do it like this, it's similar to if we would run a container in Docker with so using this publishing feature, port publishing feature from Docker, rather than the port mapping feature. All right. So now the problem is if we go like this and we don't know the port before the container starts, we can't hard code it anywhere, obviously. So now we have to think, and this becomes now a little bit framework specific. So this is different depending on the framework. We have to think how to inject the actual configuration, the actual JDBC URL before the application starts. So in this case, before the Spring context starts. And different frameworks have different mechanisms for this. Or if you have your own application, just use your own dependency injection, like specify the URL as a constructor argument or whatever. In case of Spring Boot, we can use the very nice dynamic property source feature, which was added also more or less recently. So for this, we can add an additional method. Okay, let's call it via Postgres. It has a dynamic property, no, not property source, property registry. Okay, we annotate this with dynamic property source. And now we add to this registry for the basically all the keys we had here. Then we can now add a a supplier. Okay, so the URL will be something we have to construct now ourselves, since we are using the generic container. So we will have the usual stuff: JDBC, PostgreSQL, Okay, this is like the JDBC prefix. And then, okay, now under which host will the container be reachable? Many people would like to write now localhost here. So that's the usual pattern.
That would be very natural.
Yes, but the thing is, you can't actually really know where the container is running. So, okay, if you know you will only run it on your local machine with Docker Desktop, you know it will most probably be localhost. But if you're running on CI, depending on the CI setup, you might have a remote Docker daemon somewhere. So you can't be sure. And if you want to have a really nice portable test, just use the getHost method we have built into Testcontainers, and then you will dynamically get the host of the Docker daemon in this case.
Yeah.
And you're on the safe side.
Yeah, this is very simple. Who knows where the container is running? The Postgres object that you just created. Then
exactly.
If you need any information about that container, you should ask that Postgres object. Comes with an API for that. So I assume this will be get port or get map
get
port.
map port, or we can also use get first map port because we have only one, but maybe a bit nicer to be explicit here. All right, and that should be it.
I think you need the database name there as well. So slash test or something like that.
It was called test here. Yes, okay, that's what we want to do. All right, and maybe let's extract this string. Okay. Let's leave it like this. That's okay.
This is fine.
Yes.
And then you need to add the other ones, the username and password.
And they are actually no, we can also use the Postgres object for this. So username, it was username. No, we can't because we use generic container, but we have them hard coded, so just use them here. Test and test. All right.
Right. So what we changed is instead of hard coding the configuration in the application properties to expect the database in a certain location, what we did for the test purposes, we create the database using Testcontainers very, very naturally, and then we dynamically configure the application using information from where the container is running from that object. Very, very nice. So I assume this, if you run this, then it should pass. While it thinks for a second, there is a question from chat. Marty is asking, is there a way to avoid the container being recreated for every single test class? Because their projects are large and the container is being recreated for every test class.
Yes, very much so. And there is this is even documented in it worked. It's even documented in the Testcontainers documentation. We call it singleton container pattern because when you use this pattern, you will basically bind the containers to the JVM process. So you will just have them per JVM instead of per test class. And that is one of the nicer ways. And it would work by, instead of doing this, this is like JUnit driven instrumentation still, but we could also have something like this where so this means now we bind the start of the container to the class loader loading this class. And if this would be our base integration test class, for example, where all the other integration tests they extended, then they can all be sure that this one container will be instantiated and can use it, and you don't even have to stop it. So right now I'm also never stopping the container, as you might see, because Testcontainers has this feature with Ryuk that we will automatically clean up all resources on JVM exit. So as a default, the lifecycle of the containers is as maximum bound to the lifecycle of the JVM process as a default. So we have some experimental feature called reusable containers that extends it over this lifecycle, but is a more advanced feature. Yeah.
Right. So you can always manually control your container creation and lifecycle,
Yes.
and then
What we do here, yes.
you can avoid that this overhead of recreating the containers again and again for every test. And then if you find that your tests are maybe conflicting and leaving some data behind in the inconsistent state, for example, if your tests are breaking the database schema somehow, then you can always manually control that and like separate and create two different containers for incompatible parts of your test suite.
Yes. So I just added this logback test XML file, which is the default one you also find in our documentation, just because before the logs were so noisy with all those debug and trace logs. It was not nice to see. And now it's a bit nicer. And you see, for example, here now which Docker variant I'm using. So I'm using my local Docker for desktop. And we can, just for fun, we can just quickly toggle start my Testcontainers cloud. And in the sense of all good demos, this should now just work. It automatically use Testcontainers cloud.
It better.
So it does now. Now we're seeing we are connected now not to Docker desktop anymore, but to some Linux instance in the cloud, and we're connected to Testcontainers cloud. And now the initial run takes some time because I have to pull the Postgres image again in this case, because I got a brand new Docker Testcontainers cloud instance connected to me. All right. But then everything works. Yeah. And now this took 2 seconds something. Let's run again. And it should be a breathe and much faster. And yes. Yep. Poof, poof. Postgres is starting. Okay, maybe it will still report 2 seconds because that's the way IntelliJ reports it. But you all saw it. It was much faster than before where it had to pull it. And yeah, now I say, okay, I'm I'm done with using Testcontainers cloud, and now I'm back to local.
Never say that. Never say that. You're not done with using Testcontainers cloud, but let's go back to the setup with local Docker to emulate.
Exactly. So as you see, by turning it off, I'm now automatically connected. I don't have to touch anything. I don't have to reconfigure anything. So it will all, as you know it from Testcontainers. So we like our configuration to be working out of the box, plug and play. Like, yeah. Cool.
So while let's look back at the test for 1 second. So we now resolve the problems of the fixed ports, and this is something that very many people stumble upon because fixed ports will get conflicts. And then Ingo there in the chat is not convinced and says that maybe a fixed port approach can be nice for the static local development setup, which I don't think that is 100% reliable.
So I would like to ask you the question: what do you think is your advantage of having a fixed port?
That is a good question. Ingo, if you're still in the chat, what are the advantages of having the fixed port? Because even with dynamic ports currently, everything wires together through the Java API only, without any configuration, without YAML, without nothing like that. We believe in the stream currently, both people in the stream, I think we both believe that fixed ports are not beneficial.
And if we now clean up or make it a little bit more nice-ish here and using more of the Testcontainers features, I would replace this with Postgres module, and then fixed ports is already out of question.
Right, let's do that. Let's do this. And while you do that, there is another question by Ingo as well. So what would happen with our tests if we configure Testcontainers Cloud and if we configure the reuse mode of the containers?
Then it just works. It would just work.
It just works, and it preserves the containers for some time after you created them. So next time you run your tests, they can connect to the same instance that is preserved past one run of the JVM process for the tests. So it's just and then eventually the container is cleaned up after some period of inactivity. So that works nicely, and that works sort of similar to how it would work in the local setup. Right.
So I now replaced it with Postgres, so with our Postgres module, like the class that comes out of the modules we talked in the beginning. And as you can see, I could remove a lot of code, and I hope I have not removed too much code. Let's see. And we get now all these nice getters. Yeah, that's another feature from those modules, that we have some convenient syntactic sugar-like methods to get the JDBC URL, for example, directly, or the actual username, password. Yeah.
Because the Postgres SQL container is an abstraction at the abstraction level that knows that it deals with the Postgres, which is the database. So you get the API to do the common tasks that you need, like getting JDBC URL, or in case of the Kafka container, you probably will get the Bootstrap servers URL, or in case of MongoDB, you can probably ask it about replica sets or something that is MongoDB specific, which is a very, very big plus of using the modules, because the maintainer of the module can expose you the proper API, and you can explore what you can do with the container using your IDE content assist. Right. So here you can do like Postgres dot.
Exactly.
And it will probably suggest you what you can do with that, like specifying like usernames and something.
Exactly.
Do we need to actually specify username and password?
But while no, we don't need to, because there are sensible defaults included, I would say. Yes.
Oh, so test is a sensible. Okay. It's a sensible default on the container level or on the module level. So it just
in the module also, like yes.
Okay, so it's a coincidence that it worked for now.
Yeah. So and while it's very good to use the modules if they are, if you are having a certain technology, a certain Docker image that doesn't have such a Testcontainers module available, that's not a showstopper. So we've seen generally it's very easy to wrap every container in a generic container, and that's how you can do it in many cases, or write your own class that is the abstraction over this generic container. Just go ahead like this. Just don't think, okay, this one technology is missing, so either I have to wait that someone provides this for Testcontainers, or I can't use it with Testcontainers. That's not the way. You are very, very free to use generic container for all kind of your usages.
Right. So there is while we were making this code a little bit nicer, there is a follow-up from Ingo, and I just want to say thank you for being an active participant of the discussion, and I hope they're pronouncing your name correctly. So now the database is running. Imagine we're running tests, or we're like running a local dev setup for a longer period of time, containers with reuse. How do I connect that from other tools? Like, can I, for example, have the database explorer from my IDE connect to that, or can I run a what is that, PG admin UI application to connect the database?
Yeah, so if you would use reuse, it would theoretically work, yes. Then you have to configure it to this dynamic port maybe, but you could do it like this. However, I don't think this is generally the way to the development workflow to have with those tools. I think the development workflow is more this test-driven approach and so on, and to not inspect them with the with those database tools or whatever. It's often more about, okay, I have this fresh defined known state and I want to test against this, and let you drive more. So let your code drive more by the tests rather than some more manual debugging and so on. So that's not to say that it's not sometimes very useful to be able to have those manual debuggings, but then I don't know, in those cases you can also consider just starting a Docker container by hand or whatever. Like it really depends on the use case. If you have to have those kind of more involved tooling around those systems if you need this in your workflow. Ingo has another comment about syntax check in the IDE. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't used this for a long time, I must admit, so I can't comment on the need of this. Yeah.
Right. No, well, in general, if you're an expert enough to come up with that example, then you're probably expert enough to not have problems with your local setup with fixed ports leaking into CI, where this would create more troubles, where you should use dynamic configuration. Okay, so now we have this nice example. What are some other common pitfalls that people see?
So another thing is if you want to get files into your container. So this is very useful for different cases. For example, also for database containers that support putting SQL files in certain locations in the container, and then they use this as an initialization script. Or in the Jakarta community, they like to put the WAR file in a certain location, and it will be deployed on startup. So getting files from my system, from my project maybe, into the container is something that is a usual use case. And to demo this, let's replace this Postgres container with a MySQL container and just use an initialization script and see how we can do it.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and place it like this, and we call this now MySQL. Let's just call it MySQL. Okay, then the image obviously needs to be a different one.
Something about MySQL there, probably.
Yep, I think so too. MySQL 8 we have. Okay, and so far we just changed it like this, yeah? So let's see if it still works. We would expect it to still work, or maybe not, maybe the
As long
select
as
one doesn't work.
Yeah, I think select one should work on MySQL as well, so hopefully this should pass.
So this is now not our select one. This is now the wait strategy that Testcontainers executes against the container. So select one seems to make sense in this context. Yep, all good, all cool. Okay, so now let's get a file in there. And there is this Zakila schema, and you told me about it actually, so I don't even know what this is. Can you expand on what this is? But we want to use this now.
Yes. So this is the sample database called Zakila, right? And it comes. You can download that from MySQL site, right? And this is it contains a bunch of tables, and it contains some structure, and it contains some data where there's you can use that for all kinds of testing purposes for your database. You can use this examples in books, tutorials, articles, and so forth. It highlights some features of MySQL, so it's MySQL specific, right? Yeah, it's just a sample database, right? It contains
and seems to be a very gigantic script, because copy pasting it just froze my whole IntelliJ. But now here is again with 47,000 lines.
I think you need to drag and drop the file. it's
Yeah.
both this file contains both the schema for the database and also the sample data, which has a bunch of there are countries and I think movies or something like that.
Yeah. So somehow it worked. The copy paste seemed to work. And okay, now what we want to do is we want to put this to a certain point in the container, and then just because the image is built like this, it will automatically initialize or execute this SQL on startup. And now we use something which is not the best and most portable way, but it's what many people intuitively would use. And this is called the method with class path resource mapping. This is the same as doing this Docker equivalent of Docker minus v, and then I don't know, we have /foo nach /bar. Okay, so we are kind of simulating this now with test containers. And we can use something on our class path here. And this will be the Sakila schema SQL. Okay. And this should be mapped to, I just copy this from my notes to this part. Yeah. So there's a Docker entry point in a DB directory, and everything that resides in there gets executed. Then what we have here, okay, we have a bind mode. Bind mode read only is okay. Alrighty. Okay, and then we want to maybe add a method to our repository. Void query countries to check that the initialization works.
Right, so now we expect that the schema will be applied and the data will be there, so we can query the database and verify whether that was a successful operation by just querying something known about the database, because before it was completely empty, and we expect it to be non-empty after. So while you are typing this assert, I want just to reiterate that what we saw there, this initializing the database schema, that is not a feature of test containers. So test containers is used there to copy, to provide these files with the schema available from within the Docker container. And that MySQL dump ingestion is a feature of the Docker container, Docker image that we're using for this test, right? So if you're using that and you using MySQL and you put your schema files there, they will be picked up, but that is because the Docker image is done that way. I think it similarly would work with Postgres, but you need a Postgres compliant SQL. But like it's not test containers dumping the data into the database currently. It just test containers is providing the file.
Yes. And that's maybe something we should even highlight a bit more, because if you look in the documentation of test containers, you will find that test containers also provide some functions to do this for you. Yes. So there is with init script. Okay. So many people use this intuitively, and then they struggle because if test containers execute the script, it has certain limitations, yes, what we can do. So we cannot be compliant with all kind of SQL dialects. So this is really just for more simple things. But if you have more involved scripts like this complete schema, using the facilities as provided by you by the image is much better, much more powerful for you. So just go ahead and do it like this. It's recommended in my opinion. So, yeah, shall we see if it works? So it will be not 42, I know, but I just want to see what comes out of here.
It might be 42, but...
Yeah, I don't know how many countries. I don't know what countries are these. All countries in the world?
No, I think it's just like a sort of like a specific data set. A specific data set, which should work now. I think the test will work. Will it work? Yeah, it will work.
The test will work?
You think it? Oh no, the test will fail, but like it will not be in error.
Probably
so
not.
So it will work, but it will not pass. Aha! See, very sneaky with my phrasing here. We're downloading MySQL, right? And
no, we're waiting for MySQL to start.
Okay, interesting.
Then we can even check Docker PS. Okay.
something wrong?
I wonder what happened. So it looks like. Wait. Okay, I think it died. It died. It died. So we will see. It will probably time out.
I didn't see that coming. Can we elaborate or make it not fail
Yeah,
like
we'll
that?
probably understand why.
Okay, got a packet bigger than max allowed packet bytes when loading the schema.
Actually, I'm not sure.
Can you
So
just
this will fail at one point, yeah.
yeah? Can you stop the test and just run it again? Pretend this never happened. We're gonna fix this in post, as they say.
Yeah, I'm not sure it will work now, but we can try. Do you think it will work now? So we see here it's coming up, and if it goes off again, then something is off. So we
I'm
see
not
here,
sure what's
okay,
happening.
yeah.
I've seen a very similar setup work.
Yeah. So it's maybe because of, I don't know, that I copy pasted the file like this. Could be. Through my buffer. So I can try pasting the file through the file system. Maybe that's better. That's one idea I have right now.
Okay, let's try that. And while you try that, I would elaborate on another thing, right? So when you showed this with init script API, that is you said that this is the best effort solution to parse and execute the commands from an SQL file into a database. And what I just wanted to emphasize is that it is a good solution. It works for very many cases, and it can execute commands from your SQL from almost all situations. There, of course, there are some like corner cases and this and that. It doesn't work for this particular database dump, is because it doesn't consist of the commands that can be executed in order. So this is not an individual commands put in a file that you can run individually, but you have to load this as a dump because it contains forward references to the keys, and it just disables them in the beginning and enables them after a while in the end. So that's why you cannot do this with init script, and you have to provide that as a file available from within the container.
Yeah, and I know, like, we have open issue, for example, with Postgres. So there are certain ways to define nested Postgres statements or so. I'm not 100% sure, but they also don't work with our init script mechanism. Okay, no, it's not working. I'm not 100% sure what is happening there. But
Okay,
maybe it works if we use the other way. Let's try this.
Yes, so you said that this is not something that we should be doing. So we are just providing a mapping, and this is very natural to do if you just translate the Docker command that you would use with the volume mapping, right? But this is not something that we should be doing. And instead, what we should be doing is Are you sure you're using the correct MySQL image? Like
yes.
maybe it should be like Slim or MySQL 8.
Is it not MySQL 8? It is. Yeah. No, this I used before also. Who knows? Let's see what happens. So I don't know. Let's see what happens if we use the other way. Copy file to container. Yes. Okay. And then we use 105 for class path resource. Yeah. Find mode goes away. Yes. Let's see what happens if we do it like this.
Do you expect it to be better? Yes, I'm not sure.
I'm
now.
not sure. I did not expect the other way to fail also, so let's see.
Right, very good that this is a live stream. Welcome to the live stream, folks. If you're watching the recording, this is not how it's supposed to be done. Or look, there are very valid comments in the chat. What you can do, you can just remove a bunch of inserts, like maybe like 20,000 lines from the file to make it smaller. and then it just, so it allows us to make the progress faster. I'm sure this is a Windows issue. let's I don't know what else can it be. It's supposed to work this way. I've seen it work.
I
this
think
way.
now it works. Now it works. No. Yes, this we wanted to see. Table test country doesn't exist. Okay, because maybe it's a different table name, because the table name will be, database name will be Sakila. Okay, whatever. The init worked, and not 100% sure what happened here. Not 100% sure, but since I was using Docker Desktop, if you use Docker Desktop on Windows and you are mounting files, it will run through this kind of Samba share mechanism, because the Docker daemon runs in the Linux VM on Windows, and I'm running here as a Windows process. So there is some more involved stuff going on with file mountings on Windows. And I don't know, using this copy approach seemed to have solved this issue, whatever the other issue was we have seen. And this is also nice because in general, we recommend this copy approach because it's much more portable. It also works in CI environments that have like Docker Socker mounting setups, or also in something like Testcontainers Cloud. So this is after all the way to go. So nice that this works. Now let's just fix the rest and then we are good to go. So we know now the with database name will be Sakila. Okay, let's try again. And username, I think we also have to use Sakila.
This is perfect. So with this approach, what we do is we copy the file into the container individually by the path. We don't use the mappings, which is the recommended approach. There's really no way to, well, there could be no way to predict how exactly do you need to expose your local file system to the containers. It might not be possible in some cases. For example, recently we explored various options of running Docker on Windows and Mac. And it was Docker Desktop with Minikube that exposes Docker. There were some other options there that we tried. And for example, in the Minikube case, you have to map your file system into the like Kubernetes that is running in Minikube, right? And then mount that into the Docker, which is more complicated. Some CI environments might not work that way nicely. So mounting file system is never a good option, and copying individual files is a preferred solution for that, sort of a best practice. And our tests are now passing.
Exactly. After I changed to the correct number here, 109 countries it are in the database. Maybe also in the real world. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe the chat can inform us on this.
I think it's more than 140 in the world total. So
then
this is maybe
whatever this database represents.
Yeah. The data here is
what
not
we want to see. Yeah.
The data here is not important. The fact that tests were red before and green now is the thing. So use copying things to the container. And now I think we can have another look at one more thing, which is what you mentioned earlier, and that we didn't look at that because we concentrating on making sure that fixed ports are not the solution, and that you should use dynamically mapped ports. And that was the wait strategies. Remember when we started the database using generic container, what we said was that the implicit checks that Testcontainers Java library does is waits for the container to start to expose the port, because we didn't configure anything better. But the software that runs in the Docker container might not be ready to actually serve business requests when the port is ready. So the container is up, the ports mappings are done. Something on the other side is bound to that port, right? But it might not be ready to serve your database queries or serve your API requests if you package something like that. So the solution to that is, what is it?
So it's using wait strategies, and it's one of the very powerful features of test containers, because if you, again, thinking about the Docker CLI equivalent, if you do this Docker run Postgres or MySQL, because we have the MySQL above there, okay? So this command will finish basically when the container is created. So when the process, the container process is started, and that's not a good indicator telling you if the application inside is ready. And then, yes, as a default, test containers will already wait for the exposed ports to reachable, but still, depending on the image you have, this is not the best indicator. And since we have a Spring Boot application here, we can just check out how it would look like if we want to make our own Spring Boot application we have here into an image and want to test against this. And let's assume we would also have some kind of controller class. Okay, then we have the countries controller.
Right.
And this is a REST controller. And this has access to the data repository. Okay, auto-wired. Okay, and there we have a like just again the number. Yes, we just work. This is the only data, useful data we have right now. So let's work with this. Int number of countries. Okay. Oops. Okay. Get mapping / countries count, maybe something like this. Okay, and now we want to do like an out of process, like an opaque box test of our Spring Boot application. Let's assume this is a really nice application and we want to test it through its public APIs, meaning through the REST API. And maybe we have some a bit more sophisticated setup of our Maven project or Gradle project that would automatically build the image, and then we get now, or in CI build the image, and now we have already our build image and we want to test against the build image here. And we simulate this now manually by calling the Spring Boot build image method that will build us a Docker image. And while this is happening, we can already prepare with adding one more test. So it's not really correct to just naively add it into the same project here and so on. It should be constructed in a more logical way, that these are tests that depend on an image being built before. But for now, let's do it by hand like this. I think it's okay for the demo. And here we have a test that we call, I don't know, out of process tests.
Right. So just to update and kind of help you maintain the context, we are currently trying to explore how to correctly use the wait strategies for your containers that you're running. This is normally what you would need if you don't just use the predefined available for you test containers module like we did with Postgres database, because that would include the correct wait strategy already. But if you're running containers using generic container, then it might be possible that the container is ready and Testcontainers Java, using the normal implicit checks that it does, will consider the container ready. But the software inside container is still initializing, so it will not be available for you within the test. So to simulate that, we will start the Spring application from within the Docker container. And we will hope that our test will fail because Spring application, our application will be starting longer than the implicit checks will trigger. And then we'll add the correct wait strategy to show how you can do it. And then the test will wait for the Spring application to initialize properly.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it will fail, to be honest. It might not, because unless we add something, because so we know this can be an issue, but it's a race condition, yes, and we can't guarantee that the race condition will hit us.
Okay. Just give half a CPU to your Docker desktop, and any application will start for ages there. So we will we'll see the
So
race condition.
if you or anyone knows where in the Spring Boot code we would need to add a sleep or so that would ensure that the TCP port is accessible, but the application is not really ready, so it doesn't accept HTTP requests, that would be kind of the way to simulate it. So we know this happens in practice because I have seen this happen in practice, but not sure if we can simulate it like this now. Okay. So, and now let's add rest assured as a dependency to our POM, so we can do some rest assured stuff here. Okay, the version can leave out.
This is currently the most complex test setup that we currently explored on the stream. I think partly because you need to wire together two containers.
Indeed, and as you see, I forgot to wire the other container. So to wire together containers, a very nice way is to use networks. So we have our own network abstraction that is based on Docker networks. So this you can create like this, new network. Okay. So now we have our own network, our own Docker network we can use. And we just can reuse the definition we used for the MySQL container here, more or less. And now we add some more things. We put this to the network. Okay. And then we give it a network alias. And this is very nice because thanks to Docker DNS, if our application is in the same network, it can reach this container over its network name, a network alias. Yeah? So then we can now here, in this case, hard code the JDBC URL. So, and this is Spring data source URL. And this will then be JDBC MySQL. So now the network alias. Okay, no need to getting now the dynamically mapped port or anything, because inside this Docker network, it will be reachable by its usual internal port. That's kind of convenient.
Okay, that is very cool.
And we can even say depends on MySQL.
Okay, so then now they will start in order, right?
Exactly,
so they will...
exactly. And the cool thing of the test containers depends on feature is that this depends on will make use of our wait strategies. So we can be sure that this container has started, but also the application inside is ready according to our wait strategy. This is more than the usual depends in Docker Compose provides to you, because the depends in Docker Compose, at least in the usual variants, will just help you with the container start order. But as we learned before, container started is not a good indicator for application ready. Okay.
Yes. So now we have all the dependencies, and now we just need to create a test that will trigger some HTTP queries, which you can do with rest assured. You wanted to do that. I think I hijacked the...
Yes, that's what we want to do. So let's create our base URI for for talking with our application. Now again, we use the dynamic map port for our application itself. So always the same approach, the same pattern. The host port gets concatenated with the map port, not the host port. The host gets concatenated with the map port. Map port 8080. Okay.
Do we need to start the other container as well?
No, because we have the depends on, and this will do it for us. So right. Because we have depends on MySQL, we, so to say, define this dependency graph of containers, and Testcontainers will go and do it for us.
Okay. That is superbly convenient.
Yes. Okay, then we have a request specification here. Do I not? Because the are they not updated? Maybe I should not remove the version here. Well, let's click here on dependencies. Or maybe I need the version because it's not in the how you call it, Spring Boot stuff.
Yep.
All right. Okay. And now, do we now have it? Okay.
Yeah.
So there should be a class called request specification. Okay.
Let me quickly double check my notes. Dun.
But we have some here. Request.
I think you want request spec builder, no?
Oh, I wanted to. Yeah, you see. I don't know. I think it's just I wrote it here maybe stupidly. Let me just yes. Let's go through like new request spec builder. Spec builder. Okay, somehow it because I think I can import it also. Oh no, now I've put this here. Okay, spec builder. No, very weird because here I can import it. That's short. Builder. Request spec builder. Not sure. Yeah. I don't know.
Now it worked. Now, while we do this, there is also Ingo in chat, who is very active with us today. I'm waiting. You need to type something to the finish because there is a typo there in the with envs where everything uses the same key, which is not supposed to.
Very good. It's a username and password here.
Yes.
Cool.
That would be one issue to debug like for 4 hours.
Normal. Okay, so now we have everything here set up nicely, I hope. And,
yes.
Let's do the test.
We can query our countries and then get back 109, hopefully. I mean, hopefully we'll see first the race condition in action.
That would hopefully be glorious, but...
Hopefully we can see that the things are not correctly available.
So let me just copy in the imports because for whatever reason autocomplete is not my friend here right now. Sometimes this happens. So. All right, that's how we want to do it. So with the request specification, when we get the countries, and then it was, I think, count.
Yeah, you did the count.
Yep. count. Whoops. Then we have status code 200, and we have a body that is equal to 109. Ooh, let's see.
Okay, so in the good scenario, this test passes because it correctly wires together our Spring application and our database. And in the best case scenario, this test fails because our application is not ready there.
Exactly. So I'm not sure if we could put something like sleep here in this main method. I think
There are a number.
it will not help because then the ports will not be ready. But
yeah, there Inga as well suggests a few solutions like the create a command line
failed.
runner
Did it failed? Okay, did it fail because we made a stupid?
Yeah, it was 404, so something was not found.
Countries / count. Countries count. Or do I have to drag this maybe? I'm not sure. Those things I'm never sure. But maybe this is the issue we want to see. Could also be. Could be that the application starts, but it has not yet mapped the URLs and so on, and then we see it. That would be the dream, but I'm not sure.
You need to use as underpowered Docker environment as possible. So we will see if your desktop streaming is enough to stress this combination.
Yeah, I'm switching to battery saving mode now.
Okay, we are starting the demo application, and
oh, sad.
And now it passes.
Yeah, then it was just the trailing slash. Okay. Yeah, okay. But please, everyone, believe me that we really have a race condition in here, because I have seen it many, many times in practice in those kind of situations. And on CI, it might fail, or it might fail if CI is under heavy load or whatever. So there is this race condition. And now what to do? So assuming we all saw the race condition now, which we did not, but assuming we saw it, yes? So if I do a Docker run of our thing, okay. Okay, not interesting. It doesn't work if there is no database, so that doesn't help us. But I know there is a certain log message in Spring Boot applications, and it says at one point, started Spring Boot, my Spring Boot application name in X seconds. So this is a nice indicator for a Spring Boot application that it's ready. There are other nicer indicators. If you're using Spring Boot Actuator or so on, you have these health endpoints. They are even better, much better actually, but we don't use them right now. So we have to make use of this log message that is, or we can make use of this log message that is also a good indicator. So we have those methods here, waiting for, okay? And now we want to wait for a log message. And we can now specify a regex, and we can specify how often this log message has to appear, okay? And we want to have this log message one time. And can anyone imagine why we would have such an API that has a times for a log message? It's a bit exotic or unexpected, or?
I think that is the lessons learned from how unusual software can behave.
So much. Yes. So I'm just copying the string in here. So this is based on the fact that with Postgres, Postgres will log database started, when the database has started. Okay, then you would think, okay, when the database has started, I can use it. But what will happen then? It will restart the engine. So Postgres starts up, bootstraps itself, logs database started, then it restarts, and then it will again log database started. So with the Postgres image, a very good and stable indicator that the database is ready is having seen 2 times logged that the database started. What is not a good indicator? That you can make a JDBC connection to the container, because you can run into this race condition, that you can make the connection to the engine already before it restarts, and then you maybe interact with it wrongly. And I copy pasted this thing here also wrongly, because in this case it's not Spring Boot TC demo application, but the application is called, how is it called? We saw it here somewhere. TC demo application, yes. Okay, so, and it will look the same now for us, but it's much more robust in all environments.
Right. So
and
now
you have to take my word for this.
Now it will not pass the control of the execution back to our tests until it actually verifies, using this wait strategy, that the containers that we need for the tests are started, that the containers are there. Well, we manually specify what does it mean, but this is a very convenient argument. And there are a number of different waiting strategies available, right? So you can query some ports maybe and get some requests back, or you can read the logs like we do here. But this is something to be sure, specifically when you're using generic container to package some applications, because when you use modules from the ecosystem, then typically they come with the waiting conditions predefined.
Exactly, and sometimes the waiting conditions are not intuitive. So that's a good thing about the modules, that we already suffered for you in most cases. And in case of Postgres, we switched back from a JDBC connection-based wait strategy to a log message-based wait strategy, because it seems to be the most stable indicator. And the log message wait strategy is not the most elegant way of integration, but it's very often a very pragmatic way, and it works for most images, and also images that are not that container native, I would say.
Right. Excellent. We see the green tests. We've looked at the 3 things today, and let me just maybe wrap it up a little bit. So we looked at some common mistakes that we can do when we use integration tests with test containers. Namely, we sincerely do not recommend using fixed ports. This is a setup that leads to errors that it's very hard to debug and figure out, especially in CI environments. We looked at how we can copy files into the containers, and maybe a natural way to think about that is binding the file system, mounting things, which is also error prone, especially in various CI environments where it will be hard to debug. And we looked at the waiting strategies, which when you use generic containers, very often you can get it wrong and write code that it will be exposed to different race conditions. So it will be hard to debug, probably much harder to debug on the CI in environments where you don't have the resources of a local machine. And those things are what we see from the ecosystem, and those things that we constantly help various people fix in their projects. So I think it was a very good educational stream. Thank you, Kevin, very much for joining me. We run a little bit over time, but I think it was useful. I hope it was interesting for people watching. So do use test containers. Try to use it correctly. If you have any questions, or if you have any concerns, or if you don't know what are the best practices, please go to the testcontainers.org/getting help. And there are links to the Slack workspace you can join, where you can find the team, where we will be able to help you answer your questions or suggest how to better organize your tests. And where besides the team, there is a reasonably large community of test containers users, then you can also benefit from, because they have accumulated quite a bit of knowledge about how to run integration tests, both locally and in different CI environments where maybe someone has more experience and practice with the particular one. Right. Do we have that code there available somewhere for people to check and chat, or not yet?
We have it. I think we just have to switch to public.
Right. Excellent. We will switch and make the code available for the demos if you want to play with those. Please make sure that you follow us somehow through the social. If you're watching this on YouTube, you know what to do. Hit the buttons everywhere until you are being notified. We are very happy to see you here. And we also, I just wanted to say that we have the next stream already scheduled. It is going to happen next week. Our guest will be James Ward, a developer advocate, a Java champion, and an excellent engineer. We're going to talk about test containers. We're going to talk about modern Java. It will happen on December 16, and the more precise URLs and things that you can subscribe on will follow. So stay in contact. Don't be strangers. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you once again, Kevin, for this very informative, very nice stream.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Güle güle. It's goodbye in Turkish.
Yeah, I didn't know what this was that. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. Right. See you somewhere online.